Is that right?
Yeah, okay. And at Llewellyn, basically Charlie had said, he didn't want anybody doing, I said, forget it, I'm gonna do them anyway. So for the last 5 years, I almost went broke doing short sales. But right now, what we've got is a process. So short sales right now are, I call individualized. Each of you owning a home today, your short sale will be different because of your particular financial situation. And the bank responds to that. Also, each bank responds differently.
Mhm.
So they have a negative and a positive. The positive that you get through this with literally no penalty except for maybe a credit ding. But you get rid of your house, you get what's called a 1099. The government has decided to exempt you on that even. And so in another 2 years, the person starts over. They've got rid of the, I call it the problem. So it's a solution in cases where people really are underwater and need to move. And it really answers the problem. Problem along with that, though, is that it is time consuming. And a lot of people are not used to it. The bank doesn't always respond. The bank is overloaded and things like that. So here, 1 or 2 or 3 of us have done most of the short sales. So that's pick up, huh?
No, I got some of it. I didn't get all of it.
Here's what's interesting about it, that you mentioned it, and you have to watch how you edit this, okay? A lot of the credit scoring companies are linked in with banks, because they're the ones that are impacted by how they score people. There's a circle of information here which says basically, what in the world are we doing? The harder we score these people, meaning negatively, the longer it takes them to get back into buying a home, using the money. So they're having to rethink what they're doing as they begin to give people dings for selling a home short. Because the major, we call it commodity we're selling now, gets impacted. And so they're trying to rethink the scores. What we're hearing, they're trying to rethink how they're scoring people because they're so negatively impacting how people can get back into the marketplace. So this cycle of getting people released from their burden into a rental, redo their credit, and back into the market needs to be shortened. And they need to think the whole process through.
And that process is taking place with the banks. They're learning to move quicker.
In terms of short sales?
Mm-hmm.
Well, here's what's happening with that, okay? Each bank, I may have Chase, Bank of America, Countrywide's gone. Each of them has their own procedure. That's one of the problems. And so, as you set this process up, when I go to Wells Fargo, they've got a nice little package. When I go to Bank of America, they've got a nice little package. If I've got a small, I've done one as quickly as 2 weeks. Shocked me, okay? But it was a small bank in Maryland. And they said, bring it in, get the paperwork in 2 weeks, I had a decision. Everybody was shocked, moving too quickly. You've also got, almost every time you do this, another 30 days for the buyer now to get qualified and approved and to buy the home. So whatever time you have, you add another 30-some days onto it to get the person into the home.
Is there a particular reason why standards have been set for the banks so that it's not starting all over again every time you deal with a bank?
Here's that challenge, and that's really about, you've got, what, 50, 100 plus banks out there, and literally it's like saying, who's going to tell Wells Fargo how to do business? Who's going to tell Bank of America how to do business? As you will talk to them, they've got what we call junior people on the desk who are coming in and recycle quickly, maybe 6 months, 2 years, what we're hearing. They're getting burnt out. They could have 200 or 300 folders on their desk. And they're just being deluged with questions from agents such as I, or attorneys, anybody who's in the short sale business. And so it's a burnout on their part, that's one problem. The volume alone is unbelievable. And so that's why each of them, in other words, the Treasury Department is saying on one side, okay, this is what we want to do, this is what we don't want to do, this is what we want you to do. And so they've got some guidelines from the Treasury Department. But from there, the banks are saying, hey, this is how we're going to do ours. Bank of America has something called Equator that you sign on as an agent, and all the communication goes on there. You send your documents in, they're scanned, they're logged in, they won't take anything otherwise. They've got the most sophisticated game going, and for a lot of people it's good. But offline, any Timbuktu bank, credit unions, they're on a whole different line. Generally, if you have a credit union, you're almost told you will not get your note forgiven. That's the way they work. So if the membership is going to be too badly beaten up, So those are the rough places we know. When we hear a credit union dealing, it's a second, they're dealing saying, you know what, not gonna happen. So my 5 or 10 people who've come through me to resolve credit unions, they're paying now to get through that. And they knew coming into it. That's part of the initial interview though. Because when we sit down and talk with someone who says, I'm in trouble, our question is, what is it? Is it just that you're unemployed, you are, I call making less than you were making before? What is really the problem? There are a couple key issues the bank is going to really pull out. One is going to be really your finances. What are they? And that's individually. The second big one is going to be what was a quote-unquote hardship. So yes, you keep asking, well, Patrick, what's going to be the core of it? For each person, the core is going to be the hardship and the finances. And they're going to look at that and monitor that all through the process. Wells Fargo probably is the most definitive I've heard about saying, we're not sure that we're going to take a loss. If we see some craziness in the backdrop, and there are some sophisticated sellers who've got what we call money floating, and if it shows up in banking accounts, they want a piece of that. So we say to people, you know, be logical. If you've got $15,000 sitting in the bank, and you send it in to the short sale negotiator for you, we have to send that in, and you're going to hit some consequences when you see that. They want a piece of it. If they've got a $150,000 loss and you're sitting there with $15,000 in the bank, they're generally going to ask a piece of that. They want you to be in a hardship.
Makes sense. Well, with that being said, why don't I introduce you and ask you a few questions?
Sean,
and
you
see
guys are
what
gonna
you have
need to
cover.
move a little closer together. And
Okay.
then I'm getting, there we go. Just wanna make sure I'm getting full on
I mean,
face.
everything, you know, when you say it's income, I mean, everything's income related. I mean, that's all, that's
Oh.
one of the first questions, like,
Yes.
well, you know, it seems to me it doesn't matter if you're unemployed, what's your hardship? Well, making less money. Bottom line is, well, we want to know how much less money.
Well, here's what they're doing though, which is a good question that you're bringing out. I could have one client making $30,000, another one making $150,000.